Do you ever get disappointed if your day goes on too long to where you don't really have enough awake time to wind down before you're like super tired?
Yes, for some reason, I like wind down time.
Me too.
I like being able to go, okay, no, I'm not going to go to bed. I'm going to sit down.
And almost be like I'm in bed,
yeah, and do
but not actually
else.
fall asleep.
Yeah.
Oh, so who falls asleep first usually, you or Bobby?
Oh, Bobby.
Really?
Yeah. By a long shot. Yeah.
Is it like, okay, we're going to watch a movie and then like 15 minutes and you're like, ha ha ha, and then you look over and she's asleep?
Yeah, it can be, I mean, I would say we can count on one hand how many times I have fallen asleep first.
Really?
Yeah. It's almost always her. And it can be in the middle of a movie, it can be a TV show, it could be real quick. I mean, she could hit play on something. She chose to watch it. And I'll look over there and she's just
That's him. Now, I have a question for you, which I already probably know the answer because you seem like a very nice person. Do you ever get slightly upset?
Seem like it.
That if like the two of you are excited about watching something and you're like, okay, we're going to watch this. And then she's asleep when it's like a really powerful moment. They're like, oh, I wish I shared. And then you look over and you're like, we didn't just share that. I'm alone in this.
Yes, that happens. It doesn't happen as much as she perceives that it happens. So for her, it's like, I don't want to fall asleep because you get mad at me. And I'm thinking, I don't get mad at you. It's just maybe there's been a few occasions where I've thought, oh man, you were asleep.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's just if you do fall asleep, I want to know. And if you're going to fall asleep, just give me the heads up.
Lies.
Literally,
lies.
You are saying what I have said to him because the same exact thing. Like, don't get mad. I'm like, I'm not mad. I just wish you were like, hey, I'm getting a little tired. Because here's the thing.
Right.
I always go, hey, Ryan, are you getting sleepy? And he's like, mm-mm. And he's like literally asleep. And I'm like,
that's what Bobby does. She says they're not getting sleepy. Well, Bobby, I'm seeing that your foot's starting to twitch. Like it's starting to do the thing that it did. Like, uh-oh, there's a movement. That's a sleep spaz.
Or just like full blown. Like I've looked over before and watched him fall asleep. And then I wait a little bit. I'm like, okay, he's definitely asleep. And then I'm like, hey, Ryan. And he's like, what? I'm awake. I've been paying attention. I'm like, what did they just say? He's like, I was sleeping.
Yeah, Bobby will say, I'm awake now. We can keep watching. Oh, but you're going to get right back into being sleepy in like a minute.
It's just because I don't want you to have to stop, not you, David, but Rita, to have to stop watching something that we decided to watch together.
Yeah.
Right. But there is a joy in sharing an experience of watching something. For instance, the movie Soul on Disney Plus. I thought Ryan would love that movie because it's all about musician and like being in the zone and about death. Like it's such an interesting kids movie. I'm assuming it's a kids movie if it's on Disney Plus. I thought it was so cool. And he watched most of it with me. And then basically this is what happens like all the time with a really good movie. We're both watching and then he falls asleep at like the last 20 minutes of it. So he doesn't see how it ends.
I don't care though.
See?
I just don't care. I'm like, oh, just tell me how it ended or don't.
And I'm like, but just watching it would have been better. So that's what I think. If you go through an experience with somebody, then you can both be like, oh, remember that part versus like, oh, remember that part. And he's like, no, that's when I fell asleep. And then it's like, no, I was alone.
So are we talking like officially in the episode now?
I mean, we're rolling, so.
We could cut in literally at any time.
Because Soul is another thing that could be talked about.
For sure.
Because I have thoughts on Soul.
Okay, so.
I was going to say, that's all you, Rita.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Hi, David.
Hi, Rita.
Here's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So David and Ryan, hi, hello, welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you for being back. It is the evening, Ryan.
Well, I just woke up. So.
So last night, I asked if you and Bobby would watch The Biggest Little Farm. And you did. So I think we should start this episode with your thoughts on this documentary.
Okay.
For the viewer, just so you know, these are going to be spoilers. If you have not watched it and you want to watch it, I highly recommend skip forward to, we'll put a magic number right here. Skip forward to this timestamp. No, you know what? The whole episode will be spoilers. Just watch it. Okay, anyways, David.
Yes.
What did you think of The Biggest Little Farm?
I thought it was very moving, a powerful message, encouraging about the necessity of suffering. And then also a critique that kind of started to go away about halfway through the movie was the first part. I was thinking this is a little overproduced. Like it's
where they're like on the phone or like recreating.
Yes, it was like that line of you couldn't tell what was recreation, what was actual footage, and there was his voiceover and her voiceover. It was like they were these disembodied voices that weren't. It wasn't the talking heads thing or whatever that's called. That sometimes helps orient the person who's speaking. And,
Yeah.
And then some of the footage was like so nice that you couldn't, it just was weird. Like I couldn't quite figure out how I was feeling. And then the animation that they would do to tell the story. And what it felt like was sometimes documentaries are done in a way that is like we don't know what the story is going to be. We're just filming. But this one was, once they had all that footage, all those years, they knew the story they wanted to tell. So it felt written. But then by the time you get halfway through it, now you understand like why it's important that the story was the way it was. And it's moving regardless of if it's overproduced or not. It just is a great experience. It's a great story. But that first part, it was like the learning curve of going, okay, so this isn't a documentary of we're just capturing footage and we're talking to people and whatever they say is what we use. It's like, no, we kind of wrote what we're going to say because we know where it's headed.
Yes.
Which
it's almost like the beginning was made after.
Yeah. Yeah. So, which is fine. It, you know, it's
definitely had its own style. I felt like there wasn't anything that really compares to it very well.
It's its own style, but what mattered was what they did. Like, you know, more than the movie itself, what the movie was capturing is just like incredible. It's the kind of thing that, 7 years was,
I think,
like,
was it
8?
total of 10?
It may have
Like
been total
all
10.
together?
Yeah,
I may be wrong, but
like 7 years is the last thing I remember I was paying attention to before it may have continued going on. But man, it is, that is dedication. That's like the ups and downs. And I saw in like an interview with the guy, I think his name's Chester. Is his name? I can't remember. But
I'm really bad at names.
Yeah, I mean, me too. He's the farmer and the director. And he was just saying how, you know, for his wife, in the actual experience of taking care of the farm, the camera was like the least important thing, like getting it on camera, capturing it, because she's just in the moment of the care of the farm or the struggle of the farm. So to think like, we're going to capture some of this, going, what is it for? You know, what are we aimed at here? And because think about the reference point is immediate struggle right now we're in, or this thing that is maybe in the future of an edited together version of this experience. It just seems very insignificant. But afterwards, once you put it all together, you realize it gives even more meaning to what you did, because suddenly a narrative is, you know, found in the whole thing. But
I'm curious of something. Did you potentially catch on when they talked about their plan for the farm originally? They had investors. And because he was a videographer, is that what you would call it for Animal Planet? The camera guy? Yeah. He already had experience, obviously, in capturing kind of a produced show. Like I watch Hoarders, and so it's kind of like you don't really know what you're going to get in the episode, but the episode has a structure. So he's used to that. And so he obviously has clout in that area. And then she has the clout, like being a personality and also being a chef and all of that. So I wonder, maybe this is obvious, but I think the documentary was part of their pitch to get investors. It may have been one of those, like, this is going to be an experiment and we will have a high quality production team capturing all of it. Right. And whether it goes really well or really bad, it'll still be an interesting story. And so invest in this, because not only are you getting this awesome farm, you're going to get this journey that we're going to film.
Yeah, I could see that being.
Well, that was one of I was talking to Caleb about it, and we were trying to figure out, like, how do you make the amount of money that they had to put in to get that thing going? How do you make that back? Like, how is that I don't know how you can make that much money on eggs and
fruits
and whatever else they were doing. Yeah. And it seems like the documentary, I mean, they made their money from the documentary. There's no way they didn't make and are still making good money on that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we heard about them from that, bought a hat, maybe some other things. We tried to buy something that was sold out. Like, we went on their website and started supporting them. And so, and if we lived locally, we'd probably have some of their eggs. Like, that's kind of what it made us feel about them. It felt very like, okay, we want to be a part of this whole thing. Yeah. And I think that was one of the best parts of watching it, was seeing all these people come together to help them. And you could tell that they were very passionate about what they were doing. And the part, I got like choked up a few times, but the part where the coyote breaks into the big chicken coop and the girl can't even finish the sentence. She's like, it broke in there. And you just see that they've bonded with not only the animals, but just their life there, and them having to clean up all these chickens and all these animals that had been killed. Right. And they have to just do it over and over again. I mean, we have 5 chickens, and I feel like I've already kind of bonded with them, even though I didn't think chickens had personalities. If you imagine being out there and your life is being among these animals and being in nature and seeing them all the time, and then one day you walk out and like most of them have been like violently killed, you could just see on them the emotion, like they cared so much about it. And then even how he dealt with the coyotes and just that whole journey of like, this is the enemy and like, we're not supposed to kill them, but it's not working. So I am going to kill.
Yeah.
But the most insane part of that to me, I felt like it was a parallel of whether you're like religious or spiritual or whatever. I feel like it's a parallel of some higher power and the creation of like earth and man. Like
Right.
it was so, on so many levels, I was just like, this is the story of humanity. Like they created their own small planet there with, it was dry and they couldn't even like pierce the ground, to where it's so lush that nature's coming to it, like without them even asking for it. But the part that was the most symbolic and it gave me chills and it was almost scary in a sense to watch was when his own dog killed that special rooster.
Yeah.
That part where it's like grainy footage where he's like filming and you like see the rooster and then he pans over and the one dog has blood and the one dog doesn't. That's symbolic right there. And then him being like, you don't understand how bad this is. You could tell that the dog was so sad for disappointing the guy, but also trying to not feel his anger. And it was like he was like lashing out on, and I looked at it as almost like man and God being disappointed and man being like, no, but this feels so bad. Like it was so weird. And the part where he like barks and turns away, I was just like, that was weird and dark,
Right.
but
Like
I loved it.
Cain and Abel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And you guys are both PKs. And for the people listening, if you don't know what a PK is, that probably means you're not a PK. So
Don't tell people. It's our thing.
yeah, I was going
that's
to say,
secret.
comment below if you know what a PK is. But I thought that it was, whether you're into farming or not, I think that it is such a beautiful story, like you said, about struggle. And the fact that the guru, the man who was like, do this thing, and then this is the solve to this problem that you'll run into, and then he passes away like halfway through the process and they feel like they're lost. The idea of them having to do it by themselves, what that was, you couldn't have written that in, you know, like start this whole thing by this guy's vision. The guy with the vision goes away and then they have to literally sit and observe and just be like, what do we do about this? Like the snails, horrible snail problem. Ducks, like the snails. Let's just put the ducks in there. Like that was genius. So it made me kind of, I don't even know what it made me feel, but I think we got chickens right after that.
No, I think we had them. No, like the next, we bought the chickens probably 2 weeks before that. But they came like the next day or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And it gave us a whole new respect for just what we were doing, like creating a little ecosystem. So can you kind of take me through what you thought as far as documentaries? This is kind of a unicorn documentary because like you said, it was pretty scripted and planned in some areas, but obviously there's lots of parts that they couldn't have planned.
Yeah.
So in your mind, what's the difference between a documentary and a movie? Because both have a story at some point. And like you already said, a documentary is like, we're going to film and we'll see what we get and that will be the story. Whereas a movie, it's like, you should probably know exactly what you're going to get before you go into it. So in your mind, how do you see a documentary that's like worth watching? Like what is it about it that makes you go, okay, that's good?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's, I mean, like I was saying, there's different types of documentaries. They're handled in different ways. There's some that are, you know, the person with the camera is just a fly on the wall, you know, like this. They don't actually interact with the story. The story is all on the other side of the camera. There's those kinds, you know. It's like it's the actual talent, or it's the, you know, just the person on the other end that's going to be doing all of the journeying through this process. And then there's the kind where the person behind the camera is either the one who's the whole idea was theirs, or they're, you know, pointing it toward people who are answering questions, or they're a voice that narrates it, whatever. There's a whole bunch of different approaches. And, you know, I think, I don't know what it would be that would make certain documentaries more worthwhile, but I know that the more willing they are to go to places that hurt in some way or open your eyes in some way, the kind that, like the Biggest Little Farm, it's not easy for people to go through that experience.
Right.
So to capture that is to capture something very unique that can't just be found by saying, oh, I have a good idea for a documentary and I'm just going to sort of manifest it simply by the cleverness of the idea. It's like it's going to cost you something. Documentaries really, it costs the makers something. Even that, the last documentary I watched before Biggest Little Farm was Kid 90, I think it was. Yeah, Kid 90, the Hulu documentary where the girl who played Punky Brewster went back into all the footage she had on her old 90s camera and just saw all these other Hollywood young actor friends that she had at the time, and she sort of relived those years and went and interviewed them and talked to them, and it was a very difficult time for all of them, you know, because it was like you're going through your adolescence, but you're famous.
Yeah. And,
you know, your friends are dying of drug overdoses, and there were a lot of friends she had who died, and, you know, it was just... It was a journey for her to watch all that stuff again. And that was very interesting and very compelling to hear people's perspectives of what it's like to be famous and young, you know? So that was very interesting. And then there's the kind that are, did you ever see I think it was just called 9/11. I think that was the name of the documentary, but it was the one that was filmed by the two brothers who happened to be making a documentary about the fire station in New York City.
Oh, wow.
When it happened. Yeah. So it's incredible that they were in the middle of this documentary that was focused on one of the first responders to the World Trade Center, and the documentary was just following kind of like a rookie firefighter getting involved in, you know, like what that process is. And they're actually the ones that the footage comes from of the firefighters looking at the sewer before the camera pans up. Yeah, it was them. That's really the only reason we have that footage, is because they happened to be making a documentary at the time.
So I always wondered how that was captured, because it looked, somebody knew what they were doing as far as camera work goes. Yeah,
it's eerie. And then so the rest of the documentary is obviously the experience of 9/11. So it goes from the first part being just the story of this crew of firefighters, and then the next half is just them going through 9/11.
That is insane.
Yeah, it's unreal. So they got, you know, just crazy footage and everything, but that's the kind where, you know, it's like you're making one documentary and you aim to make this story of a rookie, and then all of a sudden it becomes something else, and you have to just follow that, you know, to its end. So there's something very vulnerable about documentaries, and there's a risk because it could be boring. I mean, it's part of good reality TV is like documentaries, and as a result, the best reality TV has really bad seasons because it's reality. You are sometimes going to point cameras at stuff that's just boring. Yeah. You know, it's like you're not every time are you going to get a really compelling story. It's just, you're going to get all the footage together, you're going to edit it, and you're going to say, last year was just more interesting. Yeah. Because it's real life, you know? And so there's a risk to it. And that's why I think it's just smart to point the cameras at something that's more likely to be engaging, like a farm, you know, an unorthodox farm, one that's going to, you know, take a lot out of you. So
I wonder if they knew during kind of the pre-production, starting the farm and starting this documentary, if it was going to inevitably be a good story, because farms themselves inevitably have a lot of challenge and death. Yeah. Right. Because there's no way, like, if you know, I mean, I know so little about it, but after watching the documentary, at least you have an insight, like, this is the way it goes. Yeah. There's no way to have animals and an ecosystem like that and not experience, like, extreme attachment
and life.
Exactly. Yeah. So I wonder if that was part of their pitch.
Probably.
Yeah, it could very well have been. I mean, you got to think, like, even when you look at a show like Deadliest Catch, think about how extreme the nature of what they have to be filming must be in order to create compelling television. And even with all of that, like, you're in one of the most violent seas on Earth. You're in these huge boats. You're with rough people who are, you know, like, just kind of these interesting characters. And yet, nonetheless, even with all that being captured, sometimes it can still be boring. It's like the scale for being compelling has to be so high in order to really capture it, that it's like, okay, everything's there for the farm to be interesting. It could still end up being boring, and you still have to shape a story out of it. And you have to decide, you know, how much time do I focus on the death? How much time do I focus on the fact that part of our experience was all that was going wrong? Or is it one of those movies where, I kind of tell the story in a way that is more on the encouraging side, more on the beautiful side, and don't focus so much on the negative. You have to make all those decisions when you're trying to analyze how you're telling a true story, but picking and choosing what you're telling. And yeah, it's sometimes like the baseline has to be something unique is occurring in your life. You were a kid who grew up famous in the 90s. That's a good starting point. You're, a crab fisherman. That's a good starting point in like the Alaskan seas. You're a farmer who's going to do this very long, grueling process of building a proper farm that's really in line with the way people think these days. It's like that's interesting. Documentaries are, it's a very respectable way of telling a story because there is so much vulnerability and there is so much risk and it's just, you have to be really flexible, and you have to be flexible, obviously, as we all know, in scripted narrative stuff. It's like that's true, but documentaries are a certain kind of art form. Oh yeah. That is, I just have a lot of respect for the people who go through that process, and documentaries could take 10 years to make because that's how much footage it requires for you to tell your story.
And you're waiting on life to happen. You can't tell half of the documentary because then it's like, okay, and then what happened?
Yeah, right.
But I think you may have nailed it by saying it has to cost you something in order for it to be something worth watching, I guess.
Yeah.
Because when you are watching life, all of us have stories, obviously. Now, I think everyone thinks their life could probably be a good documentary, but I think you have to be willing to show not the YouTube version of your life where it's like, this is all the awesome stuff, and then people on YouTube are kind of getting better at like, but I also have bad days. But even that is still edited by them after the fact, where they get to watch it back and go, in my better state of mind, is this really what I want to put out?
Right.
When a documentary is being made, if you're not in control of it, you're sitting there just getting filmed, or life is just happening. And then I think you're right in saying you have to find that balance. Like, as you're discovering the story, most of the time with documentaries, it's not what you think you're going to capture. And then it kind of swings over, and then maybe that's a rabbit trail that leads to nowhere. And then you're like, but what was the original story? So it's whoever has the patience and the storage capacity to make documentaries, that is a type of person for sure.
Oh yeah. And there's sometimes where the value of the story that you told becomes more valuable later on in time. Like, I mean, the 9/11 documentary could be an example, but also my wife just recently watched an old, I think it was like 2006 or 7 or so, a documentary of Britney Spears on a particular tour. And so it's filmed like the way documentaries were at that time. They're just not that great. They're not as visually compelling as they are now. They're like, documentaries are beautiful now. At the time, it looked a little bit more like a home camera, but it was a documentary of her tour, or the last leg of her tour. And it's really interesting now because of knowing what happened to her and knowing that she was just a couple years away from kind of losing that version of her. Like, this was the last leg of Britney as we remembered when she was in that phase of everyone loving her and her being in her prime, or whatever the verbiage would be. And so it's like heartbreaking, and that's not what the documentary was made for. It wasn't made for a heartbreaking capture of what fame costs you. But now when you watch it, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a story of someone who is like at everyone's beck and call, who while they're famous, what's actually happening is it's like they're trapped in a cage of everyone looking at them, and you got to be over here for these pictures, and look this way and smile this way and stand and twirl, and then you're just seeing the cost on her, and you go, man, it's so crazy. And the other weird thing is that because there's no real influence that she has anymore the way she used to, you get this weird experience of watching someone who's so powerful in the moment of the documentary, but now there's really no power. So it's like this weird sense of everyone who's around her. You can sense the energy. You can sense the fact that this tour is a big deal, that this show tonight's a big deal. But for us in 2021, none of that's a big deal.
Exactly.
The tour's not a big deal. There's no reason to be running around with like a chicken with your head cut off. There's a pun.
No.
Yeah.
Too soon,
David. Too soon.
I get it.
It's like that weird sense of you're watching something that is so insignificant right now, but in their world, it is. I mean, it's Britney Spears. In that world, she's so important. I mean, we just watched the Billie Eilish documentary of.
I haven't seen it yet, and I want to so bad.
Yeah, and it's like that's the equivalent thing of she's right now incredibly powerful. So when you're watching it, you feel the energy of what it means to us right now. But someday you could look back and go, it's so futile. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just like a vapid thing. But that's another documentary that I thought they did a good job really letting us see how much of a kid she is.
Yeah.
Like just letting us see how immature she is, not in a bad way. It's like just the honesty of she's just young, and
Oh, yeah.
and her parents are letting her be young, which is good, and she's letting herself be young, and she's incredibly talented. And I didn't know she had a tic. I didn't know that until the documentary, and it's like a severe one.
Oh, yeah.
Like once it starts, it's like she's got it.
And she'll tell people sometimes in interviews, and that's why you don't usually see it, because I think most people are aware of it. But I think it comes out more either when she's nervous or bothered or something.
Yeah.
And it's pretty wild. But I do want to see that. So I feel like I need to watch that, and then we could probably talk about it, because that is, I feel like maybe we've talked about Billie Eilish a few times, or maybe it's with other people, because I think she is such an interesting character in the world, and I'm so curious to know what's going to happen with her career, with all of that. Is she just going to continue going upwards?
Yeah.
Or is this one of those people that everybody loves to build up just to watch them fall? Like that seems to be the case, but hopefully not with her, because I feel like she's a very self-aware person.
Yeah, I hope she handles it all well. And it's a roll of the dice, but she seems like she's really smart. She's very young and immature in one sense, but you can also tell she's an old soul in another
For
sense.
sure.
Like she's got certain reflections that she has that.
And she has a great family, and I feel like they'll support her. So another documentary, as we're talking about musicians, one of the best things, and this falls into all these categories where it's like they captured something and then you see the importance or the maybe non-importance later, is Coldplay, Head Full of Dreams.
Oh yeah.
That I could watch like probably every year for the rest of my life and still feel like it's a new feeling, because you see these people, and I think that's the point of a documentary, is because you're documenting something, is to capture what is and then use the pieces of what is and just kind of string all of those chapters together. And in this, you see Chris Martin saying like 4 years from now, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, the next scene is actually 4 years later, and he's doing exactly what he said, but it was like a joke. But you can tell with Chris Martin, and I always liked him, but after watching that, I was just like, he's very special.
Yes.
He is a very special person.
Yes.
He is the heartbeat of that whole band. And just watching him and how his enthusiasm and how he's able to get everybody on board and just keep them that way. You can hear it in his music. And maybe people aren't fans of Coldplay, whatever, but you still have to kind of appreciate a person who drives that hard at what they're doing. You know, you just see him and you're like, you never gave up and you never faltered, even when it seemed difficult. He used that stuff in his work, and just, it's like they never really made a bad album.
And they have changed a lot. So people who are like purists, I understand that they, kind of fall off the wagon. But what's really neat about the Coldplay experience is that they're changing because they're seeing the world in a way that makes them realize the best contribution they can make right now is something that makes people feel something, and most often something good. That's they go all over the world and they play certain songs that move an entire stadium of people, and they think, we want to make more of those. And it's like you can't really blame them for that, because it's not just like we got to put on a good show because we're vain that way. It's like you can tell that there's a connection they're making to an international, audience that makes them say, that's a really great goal to have as a band, to just, why don't we make music that moves people in all these different countries, different walks of life, people who may speak a different language than us, and, but somehow this connects and this moves them and they all jump. And I could get them to jump when we're at the Rose Bowl in California. I could get them to jump when we're in a totally different country, in a totally different group. They're all jumping. It's like, that's cool that's one of the reasons why their music has changed a bit. And they're, sometimes more like that kind of chant kind of song where you get like all the voices and everything.
Wait, is he a...
No, I don't
Chris
think
Martin?
so.
Hey, you can't give away what
Oh,
PK
no, I'm going to bleep
is.
that out. I'm going to bleep that.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to give the clues. Yeah. But I think he is almost like a shepherd of people in that way, where he cares about the fans, not just you fans, you give me the fame and you go on tour, like you are the one who, it's like he, or I say he, but it's really the band, because they really are like very equal.
Yeah.
But you can tell that he is probably a very feeling oriented person, which is why when they make a song that connects, and like Elizabeth Gilbert talks about this. She's an author, and she did a TED Talk about like the genius, the like creative thing that comes in. And I think he taps into that, and they use their music to kind of, his mission, I think, is that what you just said, to like get people together to kind of feel uplifted. Because even his sad songs can make you feel uplifted, which is very unique. You never really hear one of their songs and go like, oh, he must have been in a weird mood that month. Like, it's always like
I don't know,
something so beautiful.
Did you not listen to Ghost Stories?
I love Ghost Stories.
I do too. It's it might be my favorite album.
I used to go for walks, like 8-mile walks, and just listen to the whole thing.
You know, I remember Morgan Alley, a friend of ours, didn't like Ghost Stories. I really didn't like Ghost Stories.
Well, did you tell him he's wrong?
And I really like Ghost Stories, and I never talked to him about why he didn't. I remember him saying that one of the things he didn't like was the late night watching TV. and it's like he was thinking, why can Coldplay say late night watching TV as their lyrics?
Yeah.
But something about that album.
Dude, that album's
really
got
tickled.
a vibe.
Yeah.
It really does.
Like
and
a serious vibe.
if you listen to it with really good headphones, you can hear sounds in it that are just, it's like animal. It's like a big whale. It's like this kind of, I don't know, it puts you in a different place. I think one of the first times I listened to it was on the beach, and I had like Bose noise canceling headphones on to where I couldn't hear anything, but I could feel the ocean.
Yeah.
That was a trip.
And Ocean is one of the tracks. Ocean
is it?
Yeah, Ocean. The track is Ocean.
Look at that.
Oh my God.
Look at that.
It's one of the very ambient tracks. It's like, kind of.
That's probably the ocean when the ocean talked to me.
What was the latest album that they just did? Do you guys remember? What's it
I know
called?
Arabesque.
The Everyday Life?
Everyday Life.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good one too.
Everyday Life. I thought that song, because it came out during a time, and this was weird. This was weird about somebody like Coldplay. How, and Beyonce, I feel like does this too. How do these people know what is going to be relevant when they're making it before it's relevant? And my answer to that might be something mystical, which is, I have probably said it before, expression often comes before understanding. And I think if you are a true artist, I'm going to put those in quotes, a true artist, which simply means you follow your instinct. And if you are not overthinking it, if you are a passenger for that genius to go, I think you can make something that you don't really know what it is, and then you put it out there, and then suddenly the world changes, and it's exactly what is needed. I feel like Everyday Life was one of those things that when it came out, like they couldn't have written it like the weekend before and was like, oh, the whole world needs to know this. Like it obviously has to be produced. So how do they do that?
Man, I don't know, but someone else who I feel like did something that you would think wouldn't be recommended is just the sound of Billie Eilish.
Yes.
Like the way she does, the way her brother Phineas and her voice, it's just, you'd go, I don't think that's going to be radio friendly. That sounds like, it's not even that you're saying inappropriate stuff, because you're often not. It's just that the way you're doing it sounds like people aren't going to listen to that in their car.
Yeah.
Like you can barely hear, and it sounds like sometimes you're talking, and I just don't get it. And I don't get why this song's so like bassy, and people aren't gonna have bass in their cars
and like weird drum beats.
Yeah.
And then she like takes out her retainer in the beginning.
Yeah, I know. It's just sometimes then all of a sudden you hear it and you're like, yep, that's something.
Dude, I love that girl.
Yeah,
I mean, her music.
Both Phineas and Billie. I feel like people have, I mean, she obviously is the one who can take the fame. She has the look and the personality and all of that. But I love, this is my favorite thing about the two of them, is obviously they're siblings, so they probably think similarly in those ways. But I love that his type of fame would be really interesting to have, where it's like you are you help with the product, but you're not the one who's standing directly in the spotlight, because he's on tour with her. He's right there with her.
Yeah.
People know him, but he's not the one with the most fame. I wonder if that is kind of like being a director of a movie, where it's like you could probably go out and eat dinner and people aren't going to recognize you as much as they would the star. But if they read your name and then heard your name or happen to know your face. So I'm wondering if almost byproduct fame is better than spotlight fame. What do you think?
I would prefer the byproduct kind, like just the, where you have that sense of success, but you also get a little bit more of the privacy, But I mean, he's getting to the point where he's going to lose that too, because I mean, the fact that I even know that his name is Phineas, I mean, Phineas is probably the reason it's, memorable.
Right.
But it should be harder for me to remember that. And it's like I know that he's Phineas. I know that he's, you know, a huge part of what makes that music as good as it is. You know, so but yeah, like being in Coldplay, being one of the members of the band. Again, I love Coldplay. I can't name them all. I know one of them's Guy, right? One of them's Guy.
That's the bass player.
Okay, see, bass player.
Johnny Buckland, I believe. Will something.
Yeah.
Guy and Chris Martin.
Yeah. So like in that instance, as much as I love them and appreciate them, I'm just not great at knowing their names. I know their faces, but I'm not good at knowing their names. So there's like a nice balance of, you know, you're allowed to go on the ride with, you know, the ride that fame takes you on, but you've got just enough of that disconnect where it's like
you can still eat dinner.
Yeah, if I'm walking with Chris Martin, they'll see him and I may disappear. And like that could be...
You'll be the one who takes the picture of Chris and the fan, all the while you're the one who's also on stage with him and they just don't know.
Yeah, it's like that's
I think that's easier to say until you're in that position, though. It's got to be tough if you... I mean, depending on your personality type and all that, but if you have any sort of inclination to want fame and to want the recognition, or you do more than people think you do...
That would be hard.
I mean, that's definitely...
Yeah, there's plenty of friends I had in LA who that would be painful for them because part of their pursuit is to be the one who is the Billie Eilish, not the Phineas. So it would not be a great trip. It'd be like I made the moves that got me stuck here, and once you're in that gear, it's like it can sometimes feel impossible to get out. Like, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to not just be the second fiddle to someone else? You know,
I'll tell you how. Because Kim Kardashian did it. She was Paris Hilton's friend. She was actually the girl who like did her closet or something. She like worked for her. She was an assistant, and they remember the time where they knew when it flipped because they started calling her name too. The paparazzi started calling Kim instead of just Paris.
Right.
And I think the answer to that is you got to make a sex tape.
And
then leak it. No, I'm just kidding. But that is actually.
Have you seen Coldplay's bass player's sex tape?
Does he have one?
Well, how do you think I know?
Exactly. So speaking of, we'll go back to the kind of the documentary thing, because here's something, and I think we may have admitted this. Could be the first time. You ready, Ryan? The cat is about to scream out of the bag. We watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Shh. We can get this in editing. We can take it out in editing.
But here's the thing. It is a case study. So like we're talking about documentary, reality TV, like that whole thing. They captured 18 seasons, I want to say, and I started with the last couple of seasons, and then we went back to the beginning and we kind of watched the evolution. Chloe is the one who I think changed the least out of the whole bunch, so it was really interesting to watch it that way. But they captured, and yes, there were quite a few episodes or seasons that were kind of like, what was the point of this episode? There was nothing. It was just kind of like, we needed something this week.
Right.
But overall, they captured like the birth of basically all of those kids, like the grandkids basically. And you see people actually falling in love and then getting married and then getting divorced. And you kind of see more behind the scenes. And this is what I don't understand. With that show being out there, with the look into their lives that we have, and with social media, like they're all over it. Why is it that most people misunderstand them and just hate them and completely discredit anything they do and just... Why do you think that is?
Man, all I know is that I've echoed that question. That there's been people who I know are despised in the media in one way or the other, or on social media, and yet they have hours and hours of content for you to take in to get a really full picture of who they are. And the fact that people still walk away with like a really low view of them, you're just going, then at that point you're not even putting in the work to get to know. It's one thing if you have no access to it, like because it's not there, and so the only thing you have are these few clips of them, and it's like, man, they come across like really mean. But it's just, some people have so much stuff you can look into. You can read things about them. You can, they're actively talking on social media every day, or they're whatever. You know, there's several times where I've just thought, I don't know if I understand how someone can put that much of themselves out there and still not be given a fair shake for who they actually are.
Right.
You know, that's, you know, it's like,
I think the people that think that way are the ones that haven't taken the time to actually take a hard look at them. Like I kind of had that view of the Kardashians until you convinced me
Yeah, I did.
begrudgingly to watch some of the show, and I'm like, oh, these aren't terrible people. They're just people.
You know why I started watching them was because I was curious why people didn't like them, and I was like, I want to be in on it. I want to see like what everyone's talking about, and I was disappointed to not find what everyone was talking about because they are such a family unit, and I was jealous of that. I was watching, going, how amazing would it be to be a part of this family that they have each other's backs no matter what, and they're so public, yet they're still able to, I don't know, just whatever they do. I think Kim handles her fame so well, and you watch her and you're just like, yeah, she was born to be famous. And you even hear some of the other sisters going, I wish I never was. Like, I was not supposed to be this way. In fact, Kylie, who's probably the most famous of them all, you watch her, she's almost like the, what do they call it? Like the sleeper, the one who's like along with all of them, and they're all like focusing, like Kim's the big one. And then suddenly she's like, wham, and she just goes up to the front, and you're like, how did that happen? And it's Scott, like you watch all of these people and you're just like, how can you not like them just as people? Like, you have to see them with their flaws and their good parts also. But if you watch that show, if you truly watch that show, I don't think you could be a hater. I just don't think it's possible. And I think it's kind of sad that they're almost like the butt of a lot of jokes. The butt.
Oh yeah.
But,
They all have very big butts. I don't know if you knew that.
which I think it's properly bud of the joke.
The bud of the joke?
Yeah.
Is it?
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, if anyone wants to look that up.
I thought it was nip it in the bud, but I don't know if it's bud of the joke.
I
I'm
think
gonna
it's
look it up.
butt of the joke.
I'm
This
looking
is
it up.
amazing. I want to know.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff, though.
That sounds right. What you just said sounds right.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
I think the reason why the Kardashians are that way, that whole thing, but also I think the reason why Joe Rogan has had so much success with his podcast is because how can you watch 3 hours of somebody and come away still feeling like, I didn't get a feel for who they were? Because the way he talks to them, he asks the questions that you kind of want to know. So it's not all like, we're all going to talk about this thing that only I'm interested in. Like, he really truly sits there and he just asks very like simple questions.
Right.
But for the most part, you can't listen to somebody for 3 hours and then fake the whole thing. You know, you can't really wear like, I've noticed that with like some of the famous Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, like these people who are probably used to having a shield on because they're being interviewed and people are probably trying to get some weird stuff out of them. You can tell that they're almost waiting for Joe to do that.
Yeah.
And eventually you see the real version of them. And then he is able to say things to them that I don't think they've ever heard before.
Right.
And you see their reaction to a genuine person being genuine. And you're just like, this is weird. Like, they're not used to that kind of a thing. They're used to yes people or haters or whatever. So I'm curious what it would be like to be around the Kardashians.
So before we get too far away from it, it is butt of the joke. So it's nip them in the bud. Nip it in the bud, not nip them.
Yeah.
Nip it in the bud like like rosebud?
I believe so.
Okay.
But butt is an old English word for like target.
The butt of the joke.
Yeah, the butt is a person who is target of jokers, is the butt of their humor, from an old meaning of the word butt, target for shooting at.
Is it B-U-T-T?
B-U-T-T.
Well, see, what I really wanted was for us to learn something. So what I did was said
Dude,
something that
I'm
wasn't
glad,
true.
I'm glad you said that might not be true, because I would have continually
Oh yeah.
said it that way and corrected people.
Yeah. People,
How horrible
I love
would that be?
correcting people.
yeah, but it's a great thing to do. It's really great, unless you're not correct in your correction.
Oh,
It's like the
man.
butterfly effect of
It's
wrong.
actually butterfly.
yeah.
Butter.
It's a bud or
Butterfly.
Yeah, it's a common misconception.
Totally.
Well, that's good
We'll
to know.
cut it
As
out.
soon as you said the nip it in the bud,
You
I was
knew.
like, oh, that
Because
was
that's
the
the
thing.
one. Was it you that said that?
I
I
said,
don't want to call you on the carpet on this.
I don't know. I say
nip,
a lot of
nip
things.
it in the butt.
Yeah,
Nip it in the butt.
yeah. I've
Probably.
said nip it in the butt
Yes.
before I learned the bud.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
You ever watch Modern
it up.
Family?
No.
So my mom is is similar to Sofia Vergara's character. Is that how you say her name?
I don't know.
I don't know
if
how
I
to say
did
her
it,
name,
pretend
probably,
like I
but
didn't.
it's Gloria on the show Modern Family. My mom, who's Hungarian, did the same things where she'll say phrases a little bit wrong. And the Kardashians do this too. They all kind of say common phrases like that a little bit wrong.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. But
Well, play it by ear. How about that one?
play it by ear. Yeah.
Play it by ear.
Is
Did
that
you
not
guys-
right?
Did you guys say play it by year at any point in your life?
No.
Because that's what I said. I said play it by ear.
That's literally
That
on the show.
actually makes sense.
Yeah. Play it by
like-
ear.
Play it by ear.
Yeah.
But that's what Sophie or Gloria on the show, they go through all these different things because she's Colombian.
Mhm.
And so they go through all the different things that she's saying wrong. And it's so funny to have grown up. Like my mom.
Doggy dog world.
Yeah, doggy dog.
Yes, I have heard. Yeah, doggy dog. Yeah.
It's like, who would want to be in a world where dogs eat dogs? You want to be in a world with doggies and dogs.
Yeah, that is so funny. And what's funny is it does change what it means to you, because the play it by ear in my mind before it became play by ear was this idea that it's like you play over long stints of time. It's like you're playing it by ear, so just let the time go on, and then it'll shape as time goes on.
Dude, that would be a great title for a book.
Yeah.
Play it by year.
Yeah.
And then it's like how to plan for your future or something.
Yes.
Yeah, plan for your future. Vimvest.
There you go. Play it by year.
Yeah, but then you realize play it by ear. Then you go, oh, play it by ear.
Like when we next get into contact. Is that like what?
No, it's like off the cuff. Like, we'll play it by ear.
I know, but why would you say let's play it by ear? Like I'll hear for the next time we're going to hang out. Like I'll wait for you to tell me.
I always think of it as like if you play music, you play by ear.
There's like a fluidity to it. It's like
I just play by ear. I don't read music. I play by ear. So if you're
that is so weird that you had a musician's way of looking at it and you had like a timeline way of looking at it. Wow,
explains a lot about
it does
where we're at in life, I suppose.
It does.
I don't even know what I do for a living.
You play it by ear.
I play it by ear.
And ear. So I would love to talk about if you have more to say about documentaries, we could do that because I do.
Have I ever mentioned Taylor Swift's documentary? I feel like I may have talked about it in one of our podcasts. I
don't remember.
Miss Americana. But speaking of, it's so interesting because something about the Miss Americana, is that the name of that documentary?
Probably.
Okay.
Yep.
It felt just disconnected enough where it was like too safe.
I'm really glad that you said that because I think we're probably in the same boat.
Right.
I thought I was alone, which is why I didn't really talk about this. But that and the Lady Gaga one both made me feel the same way about the people, which is I was a huge fan. It was like, these people are awesome. I cannot believe their documentary. I can't wait to watch it. Then I watch it and then I see something in there that makes me go, oh, that's a side of them that I never knew existed. And now it changes everything about how they are. And I cannot look at them the same. And with Taylor Swift, I thought the part where she is not getting nominated was really sad.
Oh, yeah. And
she just keeps getting those phone calls and it's like...
We have talked about this. I'm hearing you saying this.
Yes.
Yeah,
right
I think
now.
we
It's
did.
making me feel like...
Yeah, it's deja vu.
Yeah. I think we talked about that part, but I don't think I ever shared why I didn't like it.
I don't know about that.
But maybe we won't share it because I kind of feel bad and I don't want people to not like me if they really like her. But
she's incredibly talented.
She is so talented. And I feel like she jumped onto... I'll just say it. I think she jumped onto the political bandwagon when she didn't necessarily have to. And she used a card that, in my personal opinion, she didn't have to play as hard as she did. Where it's like, this is my thing and I'm allowed to say it if I want to. And her advisors were like, don't do it because once you do, you can't ever step out of that arena. Once you have a political voice, you can't really be the old Taylor Swift. And it was almost like she wanted to shake that so badly. And it's kind of like what Miley Cyrus did, where I understand it. That's the thing. My grievance with the documentary and with her is just so minuscule because I don't know what it's like to actually be her. But I just felt like in that moment, I was kind of like, maybe you should be listening to these people and they're trying to give you good advice and you're playing the card. Like she started crying and she kind of played the card of like, this is my life and I get to do this. And then when she did it, I think watching her reaction to posting it was what made me go, oh, you didn't do it for the right reasons. You did it to get a rise out of people. You didn't do it because you believed in that political whatever. And there's a part in there where she's talking about fascism and she has like a Chanel bag behind her. So I'm like, you're not really walking what you're talking. So that kind of turned me off a little bit. Again, she is extremely talented. I think with the fame that she's had and the life that she's had, I'm sure if she was sitting here today, she would have a perfect explanation as to why she did that, and I would understand her more, but unfortunately it wasn't in the documentary. But Lady Gaga, I kind of got the idea that she is a bit of a diva, which she's allowed to be. Look at her. But there was a little bit of like pretentiousness that I didn't expect in
Right.
her.
Right.
So I think sometimes documentaries don't do those people favors.
Yeah, they can be risky. I mean, they're well, what's interesting is even though for some reason it came across as a safe documentary, the Miss Americana thing, even though clearly, like, from your perspective, it hurt her reputation. So you'd think, well, that wouldn't be safe because she put something out there that, you know, you didn't like. But I can't really explain exactly where the distinctions are, but the Billie Eilish one felt more vulnerable than Miss Americana, even though she was in Miss Americana exposing these opinions she has, which is like, that's risky. But it was like, it was perfectly packaged as like, that was the theme. I am this person now. I am this, I own this. I am this strong person. It just had, I don't know, it had a little bit too much of a packaged idea. And then Billie Eilish is a little bit more like it's just showing her.
Yeah.
And so there are the good and the bad. There is the, wow, she's a kid. Wow, she's, you know, sort of distracted or annoying in something. But then also the, wow, she's human. And she's just a very talented person. But something about that just felt more like honest in some way. I don't know why.
I think I know the distinction, potentially. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Perhaps when someone has to tell you what they are and who they are versus show you who they are and what they are. A lot of times we gravitate towards the people who show us, and this kind of goes back to like pragmatism. If you show by doing, that's like the best example. Whereas I could sit here all day long and be like, I am this thing, I am that thing. Just trust me because I'm telling you. Whereas if you saw me doing it, there's no question. I don't have to turn around and tell you, did you see what I'm doing here? Like, you've already seen it. So maybe that's the difference, is having to declare who you are versus showing who you are. And I think there's, at least in our viewing world, there's more respect for people who show you, like the farming thing. In a documentary, when you show somebody who you are and the person who's viewing it knows it based on what they're seeing, versus going, let's see who actually is this person, and they go, I am this thing and that thing, and then it ends and you're like, oh, okay, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess that's who you are.
I think there is a distinction there. I think there's you know, there's a degree. I think Taylor Swift is talented enough to let her work and her whatever, her vibe, do the talking.
Exactly.
But she ends up feeling like she has to explain herself, because I think it's just a confidence thing or whatever. But
yes, I think you hit it, because there are so many talented people, and I think with talent comes insecurity. I feel like we've talked about that. But I totally agree. There's a YouTuber that, I'm not going to say her name, but I used to watch her all the time, and she constantly talks down about herself, is terrified of people canceling her. She is so affected by comments, which are children. The majority of her viewers are children, like middle school and below. And she is a 30-something-year-old person who should not be worrying about that. But her talent is almost undermined by this crazy insecurity, and you just go, oh, and kind of like with Taylor Swift, it's like, but you are amazing, and you don't have to feel like you have to present yourself a certain way or defend yourself or whatever. But I think what happened on stage with Kanye, I think will forever live in her as this feeling that people didn't think she was good enough, and especially because she thought she was being booed. I think that sticks with you, and if you don't really deal with it, I think it comes up eventually. And I think the next album she had after that was killer. She looked amazing. She sounded amazing. It was awesome.
Well, they're still young too. I mean, these are still developing artists. They're not. I mean, maybe they've hit their prime and left it, or maybe their best is yet to come. I think they were watching them almost in real time develop and become what they ultimately will be.
yeah,
So you're kind of, it's almost sad that there's these documentaries made about people at such a young
Yes,
age,
I agree.
rather than waiting until they get to fully mature and like have their full career before making a documentary about it. I feel like the problem with Taylor Swift's documentary is you're kind of getting the snapshot before the
It's in the middle.
what's the final act of the play, the resolve.
yeah,
Like we haven't gotten the resolve yet.
yeah,
And so that's where then they try to like force the resolve. And the one thing I kept wanting to say when you were talking was confidence is quiet.
Yes, your sister says that.
Laura says that all
Yep.
the time. Like true confidence is quiet. You don't need to tell people why you're great, or tell people or explain to somebody what you think. You just do what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
You exist. And the thing is, if you know who you are, which is a very hard thing to do. That sounds easy, right? Like, just know who you are and embrace it. It's very difficult. I think we're all on the journey for that. But I think when you watch somebody who is obviously insecure shouting at you that they're powerful, it's just like, it's a weird thing. And I almost wish somebody in her life would be like, hey, maybe we should just take a little break. And I think she kind of did that. I think after that documentary came out, she kind of
that's why it's not a fair
out.
shake.
Yeah.
She's not dead and gone.
Right.
She's still doing it. Like,
yeah.
There's so much more to the story.
Yeah, and I hope she keeps going because I think she is talented and she's going to come out with more good music. And I mean, she just came out with those like 2 back-to-back albums or whatever. But I think she's got a lot more to contribute. Did you see the Shawn Mendes one?
Mm-mm.
I don't remember the name of it, but I think it was also a Netflix one or something. And he's really young. It's another documentary that's just sort of like a snapshot of this phase of his career. It's I think it's called Wonder because it's while he's on tour, he's writing Wonder, the album that came out. Mm-hmm. And I was never a big Shawn Mendes fan. Just his music was a little bit more like heartthrobby, so I just didn't feel like it appealed to me. But then after the documentary and seeing that, he's a guy navigating the fact that there are times I just want to be with my friends. But then I'm on tour and I'm doing this stuff that's grueling. But then when it's all over, I wouldn't want to do anything else but the tour. But there are those times where you're sitting there thinking, I just want to be able to go be with my friends. Like that's the top priority. I want to be with my family. I want to stay at the house. I don't want to have to go on the road again. And you can see that it's like it costs him a lot. It costs famous people a lot to do what they do. And there are days where they wish they hadn't taken that pill, and there are other days where they realize, no, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing.
Right.
And that's hard to navigate, and someday it may get to the point where he says, I'm actually done, or where he's never done. But so it's pretty interesting.
I do, as far as Taylor Swift goes, I would love to see a confident Taylor Swift. Like, what would that be? What would that sound like? And I think because she has so many fans, especially probably young girls or growing up girls and probably new fans that are younger, it would be amazing to watch somebody who has gone through that journey, because it's unlike a lot of other singers and whatever. Like, she started out in one genre, went to another one. She was America's sweetheart, and then kind of became with this whole thing that came out about like Kanye's video and her saying like, you didn't have permission and all that. And then she became like this snake. And then it was almost like, it was very weird, like what happened with her. And you're totally right, Ryan. She is not finished. It's like the middle of her journey. And maybe documentary number 2 will be a commentary on that first one, where we get to have more insight. Like, that's actually what I was thinking during this time. Because everyone, when you look back on your life, whether you keep a journal or you document your life or you just have friends with memories, everyone looks back on their life with clarity and hopefully with grace and gentleness towards who you were back then. And you can forgive yourself for some of the things that you've done. But how hard would it be when you are famous and you do that, and then everyone gets to comment on it?
Oh, yeah.
And then later on you get to look back and be like, yeah, I kind of agree with a lot of those comments.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that'd be so tough. I mean, there's a lot of people who prefer leaving their past, behind them. I mean, I'm trying to actually organize a reunion with my teenage friends, and it's hard to do because you realize how many of them are kind of thinking, I like it being gone and being in the past. And so to get them, because I'm romanticizing the idea of us all being in the room together again for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get other people to be romantic about that as well. If they're not feeling it, if they're more in the zone of just thinking, no, I'm done with that, and I've been able to move on. I've been able to live a different life, and to be back in that room brings back too many other things, and I didn't like who I was then. And, there's a lot more people than I realized who are like, I'm not the same person, kind of mindset. And they don't like who they were, or they don't feel like, they even recognize who that person was.
It wasn't an accurate representation of who they want to be.
Yeah.
So therefore it's like clothing that they gave away. It's like you wouldn't go to Goodwill and find the same outfit and be like, I should have this again.
Yeah. It's like, it's nice to be done with it. But I like the idea of going back and being with those people that you had a close connection with, even though the connection isn't necessarily the same now. And I also don't have a problem with the teenage version of myself because I knew I was a teenager. I know that that's a phase of life where I think a little bit differently, and I would have made different decisions had I been a grown up at the time I was a teenager.
Yeah.
But it's so it's very interesting to get people to look back in a way that makes them kind of think, oh yeah, let's recapture some sort of, I don't know, just like a moment in time and recreate it. And I mean, not recreate it in the larger sense, but just as adults gather together in a room and look at each other and think, here we are. It's been 15 years. It's been, almost 20 years for some. But yeah, so it's interesting, the look back and examining who you were and either loathing it or appreciating it.
And then there's somebody like Heath Ledger who, after he died, his family, there is a documentary about him that I thought was just super lovely. And you kind of get to know his family a little bit more. And so you kind of see like where he came from. And there were a lot of things that I never knew about him that I learned. And he documented like every moment of his life and just kept all of his films put away.
I have talked about this on the podcast.
Oh,
This is so weird.
We're starting to run back.
It's so weird because I'd love to know the train of thought that's guiding us into similar conversations that we've had. It's so weird how that happens. Like,
what's weird is we've observed this from a slightly different view.
Yeah, it's like we got there some other way. And now we just got back there again.
So weird. You're right.
So
yeah.
But that's one of those things where I go, what was motivating him to capture, to document his life and not make a video out of it and not show it to anyone? He literally put it away into boxes. So that documentary, and he was an actor who was doing scripted stuff and then just capturing his own life. So I'm very curious about the type of person, because I thought I might be a person who's like, ooh, I could capture footage and then put something together, because I used to kind of do that. That was like part of my job, was just to capture the day and then put something funny together and like ask funny questions that only I knew where the story was going, and then I could manipulate people to kind of make it funny, and then when everyone watched it later, they're like, oh, that's what it was. I liked doing that, but there's something so terrifying of capturing tons and tons and tons of footage and then knowing you have to look through it and try to find something. It's like super overwhelming. I also think doing a passion for a job makes the passion go away. So after doing video for this long, I'm like, do I even like video anymore?
Right.
The answer's kind of no. But what kind of a person captures and just dumps? Capture and dump. Like, what kind of person are you? Are you like, oh, I want to see this again someday? Or are you like, I'll just capture it because I like capturing it? Or are you like, I just want to live in the moment, like don't care about capturing?
Are you asking me specifically? Or
David Anderson, are you a documentarian?
No. I wish I was, for the reason of being able to go back and watch it and maybe edit something together. But we bought a camera, a little home video camera to record things on, because it's different than just capturing it on your phone. It's like a different feeling. So we're doing that now.
You're doing this.
Yeah, doing this, just like taking out the viewfinder thing or whatever. But I wish I captured more. I don't naturally do it. Like my uncle, he's someone who naturally, just when he's with the family, when he's out doing something, he's recording it. It's like an instinct that he has. And so he captures a lot of great footage as a result. But that instinct isn't in me to film things. It's just not, it doesn't happen. It doesn't click in my head. It doesn't, I want to experience it. And then, 10 years later, I think, oh, I wish I would have recorded what I experienced.
Yes, it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And I feel bad because like I kind of captured some family vacations and stuff, and then it kind of became like, oh, Rita's going to capture this.
Yeah.
But the pressure of like, don't miss this moment. Where's your camera? Why aren't you filming right now? I was like, I can't do it. There's too much here. It reminded me of like filming weddings where it was like capture everything. Otherwise.
That feeling, like there are people who they like the feeling of saying, everybody get together for a picture right now.
Right.
And then the two of you and the three of you and the four of you. And all I'm thinking is, I just want to be here and enjoy this. But what ends up happening is 15 years later, 25 years later, you're going, I'm really glad we have those pictures.
I know.
But it required somebody to be like, get together for the picture.
Right.
And, but because when you're in that particular time, there's nothing really that special about your clothes, about the table, about the house, about anything. But then in the future, you're going, everything was special because those tables aren't made anymore. And that phone on the desk, like, look how old that was. And look at what, Jeremy's wearing. Isn't that a funny shirt? He always wore that shirt. Right. Everything becomes really valuable because it's gone now. But when you're in it, it's like, oh, this is just, well, who cares?
Right.
But Yeah, it's interesting. Which is like, that's interesting because it's the opposite of the thing that happened with the Britney Spears documentary where the future made it feel futile and kind of meaningless.
Yeah.
But then for the personal things to you, in the future, like you look back and you think those are so valuable. They're more valuable now. Then they were futile. Now they're like gold.
Oh, that reminds me. I found when I was cleaning our little feed room in the barn, I found some pictures of the people who built the property. It was like their baby. And I saw some pictures of Denise with a horse. Actually, I think Ed is in one as well. So this is a couple who, they're grandparents now. But I'm seeing pictures of them when they were probably around our age. And she's like holding a horse's face. And there was a moment that I got to know her in a way that I had never in the many meetings that we've had with them. And there were pictures of their dogs and stuff. And so I like find these things and I go, I wonder if they would find these as valuable. Like I'm a stranger essentially, like we barely got to know them, but I feel like in these pictures I got to see a snapshot of their life. Yeah. And it like blew open some doors of like, oh, I see a side of her that I never saw before. And I wonder if she even knows that this picture exists.
It's kind of sad we don't take more like physical pictures, like have those laying around or lying around.
Yeah, there's some. Oh, that. I struggle with that one, laying around, lying around.
I don't know which one it is.
Yeah.
I think is it laying because you don't lie?
I think it's.
Like you lie when you speak, but you don't lie when you're lying around.
Don't make me Google this.
I'm starting to get tired again. Could you please not put me through this?
I know. 7:50. Is that the real time?
I believe so.
Wow. This one's been chucking along.
Yeah, we've been at an hour and 8 minutes.
Oh, perfect. Well, that seems... I do want to talk about Soul, but maybe we could just do you're a big cartoon guy, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Soul. Let's do 5 minutes on Soul.
Okay, let's talk about Soul.
We could do Soul fast.
So
Soul fast.
Soul fast.
We could do Soul fast.
So can you tell me your thoughts on Soul?
My thoughts on Soul are the animation is unreal.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And it just, I cannot believe the way that they're capturing light now in a pretend world. It's just, and the textures and everything. Part of me wished the story was actually just about a guy who wanted to become a jazz player because I really like that part of the story. Yeah. But I understand, they had to go on the other thing. The story was also very heavy. I mean, it was like, even for an adult to watch it, you're going, man, you got to really track with this because it's introducing themes that are sort of haunting. It's like very odd.
The part where he meets the lost soul, the very first lost soul for the first time, and it like chases them back into the tunnel, was terrifying. Yeah, it's just like like chasing after, and I was like, is this a kid's movie? Yeah. Like if I was a kid, I would probably be scarred if I watched that. It
is. There's some eerie things, and even that character is like, I'm gonna figure out what you did. I'm gonna figure it out. And he's like, and the music was always like, dum, dum,
yes.
And you're like, man, this is just creeping me out.
I'm gonna be creeping in the shadows.
Yeah,
you're like,
look out for me.
Which is that the guy who's Olaf in Frozen?
I don't know.
I think it is.
I think it's got to be him.
I think it was.
Because he is. You can tell he is such a light, like of a person. When you listen to Olaf, I love Frozen and Frozen 2. I didn't think I would, but I'm like, this is so good. It made me like tear up multiple times. But that character, that guy, you can tell he's playing a character that is kind of bad in the movie Soul, but you can just hear.
Nope. No, it's the guy from I believe Flight of the Conchords. No, not Flight of the. This guy.
Oh yeah.
Is he? Wait.
It's the guy from IT Crowd.
There it is.
Yeah.
It's that guy. That's amazing.
Now, here's the thing. There are problems I have with Soul.
Oh, okay.
Fundamental problems.
Okay.
And I also had fundamental problems with the first Frozen.
Okay, let's go with Soul, and then we'll go with Frozen.
Yeah. All I need to say about Frozen is it feels like it
feels cold.
It feels like it feels very cold. It feels like a broken story that is. It's like the arc is very confusing, and it's just I have problems.
Okay, I want to go there because that's very interesting. So Soul, what's your issue with that?
Soul, same writer director as Inside Out.
Oh,
and
seems like it.
Yeah, and I firmly believe that Inside Out was just a better execution, not necessarily meaning that one would enjoy Inside Out more than Soul, but just that in the fundamentals of storytelling, it is executed better, and part of it is encapsulated in they both have those several things happening at the same time, kind of Christopher Nolan moment, where it's, there's 3 things developing at once, and the
Right.
music is escalating, or 4 things happening at once, and it's like, here we go, this is the culmination. And Inside Out, at the point in that movie where it happens, you know all the rules of the world you're in. You get it. And a lot of it's intuitive, the way they kind of inform you about what's going on in your head and the emotions, and then the dilemma for joy and what's going on in the real world. All those things add up in a way that when they're happening at the same time, you're tracking with it, and you know why the music is building, and you totally get it. In Soul, there's enough vagaries as to the rules of the world they're establishing, and what souls are, and what the zone is, and what those lost souls are, and exactly how you become a lost soul. It's vague enough that same moment when they're kind of saying like, okay, the cat, he's going to go back into his body, and he's going to be in that tunnel, and then I forget the name of the person who's not a person yet, the girl.
22.
Yeah,
Soul
22. Like, she's going to be sad, she's going away. All those things are happening at once, but the rules aren't clear. Like, there's like a vagueness to the escalation that, to me, that kind of encapsulates the flaws in that story compared to Inside Out. And
Do you think it's because they were holding off on telling you what the purpose, like the spark was, that last little thing on the badge? Do you feel like because they were holding off on you, the audience, you don't really know, because everyone in the story doesn't really know? And then at the very end is when it's like, oh, that's not your purpose. It's just the thing that makes you want to live.
Yes.
It was almost like, it felt almost like they were keeping it from us, because had we known, then we wouldn't have really cared about the rest of it. And therefore, then the story wouldn't have really been necessary.
Yes.
So I don't really like when that happens, where it's like there's a piece that technically a lot of the characters should have known. Like, Soul 22 has been around for forever. Like, she should know what that last little thing was.
Yeah.
So just I didn't think of that before, but now I'm thinking like, yeah, you're right. There was a little tiny bit of confusion, and like, where is this going?
Yeah. And because of that, those escalating moments leave you not necessarily knowing exactly what you're supposed to be feeling, and not in the way of like, oh, I know I'm supposed to be feeling mysterious right now, or like confused. You're kind of watching it going, should I know more than I know right now?
Yes.
Or should I have intuited more than I've intuited? And then even when they introduced the spark reveal, it felt like a semantic thing. Like, oh, it's not, your passion. It's like why you want to live. Going,
Is it the same thing?
It's like, it's close,
Right.
but I understand there is a difference. But for a kid's movie, some of those weird, like abstract kind of walking the line between thoughts felt like in Inside Out, they just clicked more. So even the idea of your imaginary friend isn't someone who's like staying with you in your consciousness, and that your emotions as you get older start to blend, where it's not just a joy memory only, it's a joy and a sadness memory. Those things just felt like, oh yeah, I'm getting it. And even that they're captured in orbs.
Yeah.
It's like, that's an unusual abstract idea, but it was like a clear rule.
Right.
The rule is there's an orb, and there's an emotion attached to that memory. And so to me, that made it like resonate.
Do you feel like because they're dealing with human psychology, which we know more of, and Soul's dealing with death, which we know way less of,
you may be onto something,
that it's just kind of hard because it is abstract anyway?
Yeah.
I thought the thing I liked about the beyond, so they talked about the before a lot and the present Earth, whatever, but the beyond, I like that they didn't give you some kind of hopeful message on that. They left it ambiguous. And it's not to say like you do zap and disappear and there's nothing there. It was more like, we're not going to deal with that because no one can know, and we're not going to give kids, because this is what happens when a movie like that, obviously it's an animated movie and a guy goes into a cat's body, so it's not real. But I think when you give people an answer on what happens after death, it automatically goes into like, oh, well, if that's what you think, that doesn't really line up with what I think. And so then the whole story is kind of like that. If that's where you're headed, you want me to believe that, then. Yeah. So I think leaving it ambiguous was actually a really good decision, because it made the before, because it wasn't focusing on death, it was focusing on pre-birth. You can accept that a little bit easier because you want that to be true. Yeah. Because then if that's true, perhaps you don't just zap away. So I liked that they gave you that there was something else to think about besides like death and the soul not in the body. Like, could it just be a little baby soul that's never had a body before, or like? Yeah. Yes, there are a lot of really clever and well executed ideas. Because it worked for a lot of people. I mean, it was a successful movie. I think it won awards or something. I can't remember. I feel like it was nominated. That's how I heard about it. I thought it was a short. Actually, I didn't know that it was a full movie. Yeah, they did a great job. It's still an excellent movie, but there's like
it's one of those types of comparisons that as I'm watching that one, I can't help but think of Inside Out because of the, you know, kind of parallels.
Mm-hmm.
But then also I'm thinking of just certain moments of the benchmarks in that story that just felt like, okay, it was clicking more in Inside Out. And, you know, not just necessarily in the subjective sense, because again, I think one can still enjoy Soul more.
Yeah.
Even though I think fundamentally Inside Out is a better story, or however you would word that in like a technical sense. Like
it's more complete as far as the viewer knows what's going on.
Yeah, because all the time there are movies where I would argue this one's better than that one, but you could easily like that one more.
Yeah.
Because that's the subjective part of it, just like something you like the character in a certain way, or you like something about the way the director did stuff that just is more important to you than whether or not it hit the right beats at the right time.
Yeah.
You know, that may not really matter to everybody, but nonetheless, Soul, it was gorgeous movie. Really had great moments. The other thing was too, the lesson at the end of him taking in the moment and kind of like just being present, or not at the very end, but when he started to really learn to just sort of take in like the falling leaf and everything. I had just recently watched The Sound of Metal, which leads to a similar kind of take in the moment, breathe in. And of course that landed, you know, way heavier. So it was like real close to when I saw Soul. I had watched Sound of Metal, then I watched that, and it felt like a main character at an important part of the movie, looking up, taking in the noise, hearing the leaves, or not hearing the leaves, and just, you know, like just looking at the leaves or whatever. I thought, oh, that one, at that point in the movie, at that moment, I was right there with the character. In Soul, it was like I was so overwhelmed by the world I had to take in and the fantasy that I'm going, I get what they're trying to do. It's going to be good enough, but I was still kind of like in the, whoa, there's a lot that's
It's a very ambitious movie.
Yeah.
very ambitious.
Yeah.
That's a great word for what Soul is.
To
Yes.
try to like really do pre-life and afterlife and do
Yes.
it in a way that you can make any sense of it and make a
Mhm.
story out of
for
it.
kids.
Yeah.
on
I'm glad
Disney
they did it
Plus.
though. I'm
Yeah.
glad that people are doing things like that. Even the Inside Out, the all about the emotions and everything.
Mhm.
Like it's such an important thing to kind of think about.
Yeah.
I don't think many adults have really thought about.
You know, it's funny. They say that kids' movies tend to have far more death of parents involved in the stories, or death in general, like a central part of the story. And it's just interesting because something about the like primary nature of telling a kid's story suddenly gets the adult to writing about like the most fundamental of our emotions, whether it's about loss or it's about courage or sadness or something, because you're just thinking, well, the kids need to learn the basics. And before you know it, one of the basics is you're going to lose something that you love.
Yeah, there's not a lot of kids movies about accounting. Or taxes, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, Schoolhouse Rock. That was,
Yeah.
you know, they did a good job with those kinds of things.
Yeah.
How a bill becomes a law.
Yeah.
But I do think that the word ambitious is good because I truly believe that the conversation about death is needed. It's necessary. We don't do it at all, really. And when we do it, it is kind of a performance. Like when somebody loses someone, we obviously have feelings and we a lot of times can't really control them. But I think a lot of times if you're numb, you then feel bad because you're not performing in the way that you've seen people perform. And so I think the experience of death and loss, we're so afraid of it because we just don't talk about it and therefore we don't understand it and all of that stuff. But I feel like movies like this is the first step to the conversation, because imagine a kid watching that and going, so was I a little soul before I got here? And it kind of forces parents to be like,
forces them to lie.
Okay, this is what's interesting. That I just had a conversation with my friend about, which is actually kind of funny, that Ricardo was watching it with our nieces, his daughters, and they were not interested, so he watched it alone. So I'm like, it's kind of funny that a kid's movie, they're like, yeah, we're not interested. But I was talking to my friend Megan, and she has had the first couple of conversations with her son about kind of loss, like people who are not here anymore. And she is not somebody who wants to lie to her children, but she also doesn't know exactly what words you tell to a child who's like just learning how to talk. Like, what words can you comprehend and understand? And she's also realizing like he's understanding more than she thinks. And so it's really interesting that there isn't really a pamphlet that's like, this is how to talk to your children about death, because so much of it has to do with your beliefs of the afterlife. So many people just go, Jesus died on the cross for your sins, so therefore we're going to go to heaven together. And it's like, that's the done deal, at least in the world of Christianity. I don't really know what, other people will say, but a lot of it has to do with your beliefs in something that happens afterwards. And I'm like, yeah, but can we talk about here? Like, what do you do here when either your friend loses someone? How do you help someone grieve? Or when you lose someone, or even thinking about your own loss of life? Like, I think we should have more conversations about it, but it seems so morbid and so like, I don't want to even go there. I can't imagine it. But I don't think it should be that way. I don't think people should be so afraid of it, but it's like, where do you start?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what do you say?
Yeah. And speaking of Frozen, even in that, like the opening kind of sequences to establish the story, the parents are lost in like a violent sea storm, you know, and you see the boat get swallowed up. And again, a kid's movie.
Have you seen the second one?
Yes. Yeah.
You know the part where she like recreates the moment where they die?
Yes.
That was really sad.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
It, like,
there's
made
like
me
heavy
tear
stuff.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like the second one more.
Yeah.
Than the first one. And part of the reason I don't like the first one is because I don't get the concept. I just don't understand. I don't get Elsa's dilemma because it's like a really, really weirdly self-inflicted thing that part makes sense. But then once she starts to get to the phase of conceal, don't feel, conceal,
concealed,
whatever.
Don't feel,
So she's going through that need for freedom, which was in part self-inflicted. And then when she finally goes on that song, like, I'm going to let it all go, she essentially locks herself in a room to the extreme. She takes herself away from everybody. It would have made more sense if she would have taken over the kingdom as like an evil queen or something.
Right.
But she doesn't. She goes and hides away, which the reason why that feels so disconnected is because it wasn't written that way, which I learned. That the movie feels like disconnected and conflicting ideas because there were rewrites, and Elsa was going to actually be more of an all-out villain. And then as adjustments happened, she became like a friend sister, and then became like, oh, what if the love story was the love of sisters? But it wasn't that way initially.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah, and so you go, there were certain adjustments they made that make you go, it seems like the story's not connecting, but yeah, that's why.
So true.
And ultimately, people watched it, they were fine with it. They didn't go like, this doesn't make sense, it's not working. They just thought, this is great, love it, boom, it worked, huge success. And then you get a sequel, and what's interesting is you get a sequel that makes more sense. Yes. But yet the first one will always be better. It will be like better
the
in
original.
that untouchable kind of sense. Like that was the right one. And then Frozen 2, it doesn't really matter that it's better in a technical sense.
Wouldn't Frozen 2, nothing changed on it, make more sense if Elsa had been evil at some point? It's true. Yeah. She kind of needed to be that, but she wasn't. But I love the second one, mostly because it is very it is a little bit darker, but like the one song about like don't go too far or you'll drown, like that was like a beautiful lullaby that's really scary kind of. But I loved the water horse.
Oh dude, that was intense.
Like when it's like drowning her and she has to like fight it to like get back on it.
That sequence.
So the animation.
I don't know if you're laughing with us or at us.
No, I love it.
I mean,
I forced him to watch it because I was like, this is...
I was totally uninterested, but it was a pretty good movie.
That sequence is just like incredible. I was going, this is unreal. Because you feel like there's something about animated movies sometimes. There are action sequences because everything's animated. The physics are like more... I don't know, like you can feel the physics more than sometimes when they're trying to get both live action and animation to play with each other. So it's like that type of sequence of her in the water and her dealing with the waves and dealing with that horse. It was just like, this is incredible.
It's very archetypal too.
Yes. Yeah.
And being a horse person, this was before I got the chance to be around horses again. It was like my soul came alive because it's exactly what happens. Like the horse is basically showing you, like, I'm not going to just let you take me. You have to prove you're worthy to ride me. And it's like trying to throw her off until finally they're just like going and going and going. And then the horse just kind of like calms down and they just go together. Yeah. Oh, it was so beautiful. I loved that part. And then where she just like goes on horse rides in the water, like just for fun later. I'm like, yeah. Can I please do that? Can I have a water horse?
Right.
Okay. So...
You're at just under an hour and a half.
We found the fundamental flaws in a lot of Disney movies. Disney, hire him.
Yeah, yeah. I also have compliments for Disney movies, but
Well,
those
everyone
aren't
has compliments.
Yeah, that's not as enjoyable as.
I'm sure that if we tagged Disney, here's the problems with your movies, somebody's going to watch it because they're going to be like, wait, someone has a problem?
Yeah, they'll start watching the podcast and be like, how long before they start talking about Disney?
They've been on Taylor Swift for a while now.
I don't care about ducks eating snails. What did they say about Frozen?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this was very enjoyable. I feel like, then now that you're cured of COVID.
Yes, yeah, I got the COVID.
You got the Rona.
My family got it, and everybody's okay, thankfully, because that does not happen for everybody.
Right.
So.
Do you feel bulletproof now?
No, because it's like, they keep talking about stuff and they're like, you don't feel safe ever.
Yeah. They're like, double mask, doesn't matter.
Yeah. So
it's
I'm
coming for you.
But I feel okay that my body handled it and my wife's body handled it and our little kiddos. That's a good feeling. But it's still like, my parents haven't gotten vaccinated yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, and at some point we'll still get vaccinated, but it's like, you just kind of go, I'm not out of the woods yet.
Yeah.
It's still out there.
Yeah.
And
Taylor Swift. Are we out of the woods? Are we into the woods? Okay. Well, David, this was very enjoyable. Ryan, thank you for running the show.
Anytime.
Yes.
And you get to go nap now. Or real sleep.
I'm not tired anymore.
It took him the whole hour and a half.
Yeah, I feel awake.
Yeah, let's go. Let's start recording.